Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Becky Robinson, and I am so thrilled today to be with my friend and client, Heather Younger, and with her friend and my new colleague, Stephen M.R. Covey. Welcome, Heather and Stephen.
Hello.
So you are coming
Hi.
into this Zoom room. Hi. So as you're coming in today, we hope you'll take a moment to acquaint yourself with the chat. And we would ask that you please use the drop-down menu to select everyone so that everyone can see your comments throughout today's event. We strive to have an inclusive community in our webinars. And so we invite you throughout the event to engage with us in the chat, post your questions, your comments, and we will be sharing the chat later with Stephen and Heather. I can see that many of you know the drill on our webinars. You're letting us know where you're calling in from. Already, I can see that we have an international audience. I also want to mention if you happen to be calling in today as part of your professional development and you are representing an organization, we would love to see the name of your organization. And I would say that I would give you a shout out, but I know we're having record-breaking numbers on this webinar, and your comments are coming so fast that I can't really actually read them to give you a shout out, but I will notice that I have Honor Health. I see that Stephen's friend, Roger Dean Duncan, is on the call in
Oh,
Liberty, Missouri,
fabulous.
and he says, hello, Stephen.
Hi,
I'm,
Roger.
I'm continuing to see an international audience and some people naming their organizations. Please know that we're going to take a look at each of those, and we greatly appreciate your investing this hour in learning with us. A few other notes before we get started. We are recording this event. You will have access to share the event with your friends and colleagues later. And toward the end of the hour, you will have a chance to type your questions in the chat. We'll be gathering them throughout, and we will get to as many questions as possible because we know that you have a lot that you want to learn from Heather and Stephen today. So thanks to all of you. And I'm so excited for us to dive in. This is the third of 3 webinars celebrating the forthcoming launch of Heather Younger's latest book, The Art of Active Listening, How People at Work Feel Heard, Valued, and Understood. And so it's possible that you've attended one of the other events, but in case you haven't, I do want to take a moment to share more with you about Heather. And just a quick note that I'll be sharing more about Stephen M.R. Covey a little bit later in our program. So Heather is the founder and CEO of Employee Fanatics, which is an organization dedicated to inspiring and training leaders to put their employees first. She is a frequent keynote speaker, traveling all around the world to share with audiences in a very engaging and heartfelt way. And she also is the host of a popular weekly podcast, Leadership with Hearts. I can see all the hearts flying on this event. So I know that you all love Heather the same way that I do. And The Art of Active Listening is actually Heather's third book. It follows the art of caring leadership and then a previous first book, The 7 Intuitive Laws of Employee Loyalty. I don't have that one on the tip of my tongue. So welcome, Heather.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, so I am amazed to see how many folks we have with us already, almost 500, and we want to take a moment to engage you quickly through a poll. So we are curious to know, this is the third of 3 webinars. Have you attended the first 2? And the choices are yes or no. And we would love to hear. And here's something amazing. We have a lot of first timers, Heather. This is, for many people, the first exposure to your new book. So that's pretty
Ooh,
exciting. Thanks
very
to those
exciting.
who are taking a minute to answer that poll. And it looks like people are still answering. So I'm going to give them one quick minute. All right, so let's take a look. Almost 90% of you have not attended one of the first 2 webinars. So what I want to say is they were phenomenal. They are available on recording and you can access them later. So we will make those links to those first 2 webinars available to you. So welcome to the 90% of you who are new. Welcome to the 10% of you who have been with us before. We're really grateful for your continued interest. All right, one more quick poll question for you on the topic of active listening. Which of these benefits of active listening resonates as the most important for you? Is it that you hope to help build trust and enhance relationships? That active listening provides a deeper sense of importance and belonging? Active listening increases overall satisfaction and happiness at work? Or active listening helps decipher the difference between thinking what people want and knowing what they want? And we are going to make you choose. So thanks to those who are answering this poll. We just want to get a window into what motivates you to learn more about listening today. So thanks to many of you who are answering this poll, and many people who have come into the room, even in the time that we've been doing these. All right, so quick look at those results. It looks like more than half of you are interested in this intersection between active listening and trust, and the way that active listening can enhance relationships. So thank you for sharing your thoughts on the poll. And before we get into the conversation with Stephen M. R. Covey and with Heather, we do want to take just a quick moment for Heather to talk to us a little bit about the concept of active listening as we get started today.
Well, it's interesting because when we think about active listening, before this book, most people thought of it as just the idea of reflecting back to people what it is that they said to us, maybe sitting across from them and shaking our head and maybe leaning in. And these things are super important, but it's one step in the cycle of active listening that I put forward inside this book. And so there are multiple other steps, but the seeking part is probably one of the most important steps. It's because if we go into listening in the way that I'm talking about with the reflection, and we're going in really to seek to understand, to go deeper, to really understand and lean into the other person's perspective in the moment, we're going to get to the truth of the matter, and we're going to be able to get to the outcomes we're looking for. If we go into that seeking that's not fertile, we go into that interaction just to go get something from them, not to serve them in the moment, we are not going to get the outcomes we're looking for, and we'll never get to the truth because the people see right through it. They see right through us. So the other steps that are involved in there are really more experiential, kind of taking the environment in advance of that interaction of leaning in, and then taking time to process. I call this decoding. Process what it is that we're taking in and reflect on it before we take what the next step is action. And then finally, after we've acted, we go back to the people that actually gave us the feedback, and we let them know what we plan to do about it, what we have done about it, or if we cannot do anything about it, what that might be. So it's a holistic process. It's not just the one thing we've thought about traditionally of listening. It includes a level of action and perception in addition to that leaning in process.
Thank you so much for that grounding for us. And I know that people can read the entire model in the book that's coming in just about 1 month. So we'll be telling you more about that throughout today's event. And I'm so excited for us to dive into a conversation with Stephen M. R. Covey. And I've noticed already in the chat that many of you are talking about Stephen's impact, literally being the man who wrote the book on trust. So Stephen M. R. Covey is a New York Times bestselling author and #1 Wall Street Journal bestselling author of The Speed of Trust, which has been translated into 22 languages and sold over 2 million copies worldwide. He's also the author of this newly released book, the one that I am privileged to hold in my hand today, Trust and Inspire: How Truly Great Leaders Unleash Greatness in Others, which was recently named the #1 leadership book of the year by the Outstanding Work of Literature Awards, which is amazing. And Stephen actually shared with us before the webinar began that Trust and Inspire will be out in paperback in just a few weeks. So that will increase the reach of the content, as many people will buy that paperback book who maybe didn't have a chance to buy the hardcover, which is amazing. Stephen brings his writings the perspective of a practitioner, as he is the former president and CEO of the Covey Leadership Center, where he increased shareholder value by 67 times and grew the company to be the largest leadership development company in the world. So what a blessing that we get to learn with him and with Heather today. A couple more notes about Stephen. He is a Harvard MBA who co-founded and currently leads Franklin Covey's Global Speed of Trust practice. He serves on numerous boards, including the Government Leadership Advisory Council, and he's been recognized with the Lifetime Achievement Award for Top Thought Leaders in Trust from the advocacy group Trust Across America, Trust Around the World. Stephen is a highly sought after international speaker, and he's taught trust and leadership in 57 countries to business, government, military, education, healthcare, and NGO entities. So I hope you'll join me in welcoming Stephen M. R. Covey today. Amazing. So Stephen, what our listeners might not know, and look at all the love that we're getting with those emojis. I love to see that. What people might not have noticed when I held up Heather's book is that if they can zoom in on that, it says on the top of the book that the foreword of the book is by New York Times bestselling author Stephen M. Covey, and that's you. And so we wanted to have you on today because you did choose to write the foreword. I hope you'll tell us, why did you choose to write the foreword to this book?
All right. Well, thank you, Becky, for that kind introduction. And I am honored to be here with Heather on this special webinar we're doing together. And I wrote the foreword to the book for many reasons. Number one, because Heather, who is my friend and colleague, she asked me to, and I value her and believe in her and have been impacted by her and her work. So I was humbled and honored to be able to do this. And I really felt as I spent time in reviewing the manuscript and reading this book, that what Heather is doing with this book, the art of active listening, how people at work feel heard, valued, and understood, that this truly was additive to all the work on listening that was out there. It was adding to it, just like Heather went through at the outset. It was taking the idea of seeking to understand, but adding more to it, of recognizing the unsaid and the decoding and the acting and then closing the loop to all of this whole process. So I felt like it was insightful and that it was additive to all the work out there on listening. Second, I also felt like it was so immediately practical and actionable that I could get ideas I could apply immediately coming out of experiencing this book and reading it. And then finally, I just believe so much in Heather. So Heather, the thought leader, the author, the podcaster, the great speaker, all that she is and does, and the relationship and connection that we have in our work being along parallel paths, that I just felt like I was truly humbled and honored to write it. So those are the reasons. I really feel like this is advancing what is needed in our world today, greater understanding. And no one has done this as well as what we're seeing right here with Heather's work. So really humbled and honored to do it.
Thank you, Stephen. I love those words. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Heather.
So as we dive in today, one of the things we wanted to start with is a question we've asked our other webinar guests over this series. I want to give a little bit of framing to it. So your father, Stephen R. Covey, wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, among other books. And in your two highly praised books, The Speed of Trust and Trust and Inspire, what we're wondering about is, with that background and expertise, what would you say are the biggest challenges that we're facing in 2023 for organizations and leaders, especially those who want to create deeper levels of trust as they lead and inspire others to greatness?
Yeah, I kind of highlight some of this in this new work, Trust and Inspire, how the world has changed and is changing right in front of our eyes. And yet our style of leadership has not, or at least has not kept pace to this changing world. Too many leaders, too many organizations are still kind of operating out of the old model, the traditional model, the more hierarchical, top-down, I call it command and control. And what's happened is we've become better at it. So it's become a more advanced and more sophisticated and enlightened command and control. But it's really not tapping into the potential, the greatness, the talent that's inside of people. It's not unleashing it. And we need to move from this old model into something that's more relevant for our time, for our world, for the changes, for these new generations that are coming up that have a completely different expectation of how they want to be engaged and led. You know, Gen Z, the Alpha generation, millennials. People don't want to be managed. People want to be led. They want to be trusted. They want to be inspired. And so that was the idea, is to say we need to move from command and control to trust and inspire, which is a better way to lead in a new world of work, recognizing how everything has shifted and changed. The workplace has changed. The workforce is changing, technology disruption, and our style of leadership needs to change with it, be relevant for our time. And that's the idea behind it. And at the heart of this is understanding, because that is what gives us power when people feel understood. See, the test of understanding is not when you tell another, hey, I understand you. It's when they say to you, I feel understood. Or in Heather's words, I feel heard, valued, and understood. Thank you for listening. And that, it builds clarity, it builds power, it builds trust. And when you have that kind of foundation in place, then you can move so much faster and you can have so much greater creativity and innovation. And people don't just feel engaged, people can feel inspired. And we really need to move, yes, to engagement, because engagement matters to everyone and it makes a difference. But there's something beyond engagement, and it's inspiration. When people feel inspired, because not only will it bring out the best in them, it will also help them achieve their greatest sense of purpose and of contribution and of value creation. And so they're happier, more joyful, more fun. And so it's what we're trying to do. But understanding is at the heart of this. And I wrote about it in The Speed of Trust, of how one of the key behaviors that builds trust is listen first. And in fact, there's 13 behaviors that I highlighted. And the interesting thing is in our 360 data, as we look at our data from that, but also in the team trust indexes that we run of a team or of an organization, the lowest rated behavior of the 13 behaviors is listen first. So we know this is important, and yet we're struggling in doing it, but it helps build trust. And then in this new work, Trust and Inspire, one of the things that we need to model as leaders is empathy and understanding to go along with the performance. And we know the importance of performance. We may not understand the importance of the empathy. And this is, again, where Heather's work is so helpful to us, not just to seek to understand, but to have the entire process of having people feel heard, valued, and understood at work. And that's why I feel so aligned to it. So this is vital to building the kind of trust that we need in our world today, because we live in a world where very few feel understood and they're not feeling heard and not feeling valued. What if we can provide that? It is a gift. What oxygen is to the body, understanding is to the heart. It's like giving people emotional and psychological air. That is a gift.
Love it so much. And I say often that giving people our undivided attention, our presence, our true presence is a gift to them. And to be honest, is a gift to us, because we get more in that moment when we really are kind of peeling away the fray, really ridding ourselves for all the distractions, everything that can just really get in the way of us being present. And when we do that, I know I have it. You probably can think of times too, when you have taken that time to lean in with someone, you've gotten to the bottom of something you never knew was there. It helped you solve for an issue with them, helped you achieve other things you were looking for. And so I think that that presence is so key. And I really appreciate that. So, such goodness there from you, Stephen.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Well, so it's amazing to be with the two of you and the powerful connection where you've both endorsed each other's work, been on podcasts together. We were talking before the webinar about how you've even shared a stage at in-person events. As you know, Heather, you were talking about caring leadership, and Stephen, you were talking about trust. And so, Heather, I'm wondering if you can share with us a little bit more about how you think active listening plays a role not only in building trust with the people we lead, but also in inspiring them to be and become their best.
I think it boils down to this. Well, I think listening is the foundation. You can't even have good listening unless you have trust. So like trust is at the bottom, and it's kind of like a kind of a circular thing, because people aren't going to even tell you the truth that you really need, by the way, or else there's lots of blind spots. They aren't going to tell you the truth unless they trust you. And they don't trust you unless they know that you're truly listening to them and you're being present with them and you're valuing their contributions. And so when we think about active listening, and particularly as we think about the full framework of taking in what's not being said, really being aware of what's happening in the environment and responding to it, seeking in a way that's fertile, that's seeking to serve the other person, taking the time to really decode and reflect on and pause and to think about what it is you're going to do next, to be thoughtful about what kind of action you're going to take, and then follow back up with them to let them know the power that's embedded in that model is is amazing. And it's not one that most people run through. And so that those at work don't ever really feel the full power of their voices. They don't. And so if we think about active listening in a way that gives people power, that makes them feel powerful in a place where they often feel hopeless, helpless, unheard, I think it's the biggest tool we can add to our toolkit right now. And so I think, again, trust, listening, just as if we're right here, right now. Stephen and I know this at the core. It is embedded. It's together. It's tied. You cannot really separate them. And I truly believe in it. So all the research I've done, it really boiled down to how listening is the driver for the inspiration. It's the driver for the trust. Because you can't get any of those things unless people know that you're there with them. And it's not about you. And it's not about what you're trying to get to. And it's not just about your goals. How much are you really leaning in to fill their needs? Because you're going to get what you need in the end. That's the question.
Yeah, and that's beautiful because they truly are symbiotic. They're interconnected. When there's the greater the trust, the deeper, the more powerfully we can listen and understand and help people feel understood. But also works the other direction. That's the more we listen and understand, the greater trust that we build. Mm-hmm. that people feel heard by us, and they begin to become more open to us. They begin to trust us more. It's symbiotic. It's a virtuous upward spiral of listening, creating trust, and greater trust, creating greater listening with understanding. And so virtuous upward spiral in both directions of coming at it, it's vital. And I've learned it time and time again. And I see it all the time in the work that I'm doing. And in fact, I tell people when we're talking about trust and building trust across cultures and the like, and they say, well, how do you build trust when you have different, viewpoints? Or how do you build trust when you go into different cultures? And my starting point is to say, look, I'd always start with this: listen first, and then demonstrate respect for what you hear. That's kind of my way of saying what Heather has beautifully said in her active listening cycle, that there's this process of really trying to seek this understanding. And that's the starting point to building trust, especially when there's emotion or disagreement, or when there's, different context. People are coming at it from different angles, different places. Listen first, demonstrate respect for what you hear. And you go through this process of active listening, this cycle that Heather so beautifully kind of names the different steps to help us in this process. And then it becomes this mutually synergistic, virtuous upward spiral.
Love it. I want to get amen, like seriously, amen, like woohoo, like it's time to celebrate, like right there. That symbiosis is just amazing. So, just love it. I'm a little geeky. So anybody who knows me knows this about me. And if you don't, you'll know a lot. I get geeky. I've got hair standing on my arms because in my mind, as you think about so many of the things that we look for at work, in our interactions and our relationships with our clients, with our team members, with just coworkers, whatever it is, we're seeking something more. We've been there we stay there like 40, 50 hours a week, right? So in my mind, there's something that we're getting to. In order for us to feel like the work we do is meaningful, to feel like we're accomplishing something bigger than ourselves with other people like-minded on this journey, we have to know that they care for us. All of them, right? And us to them. And the biggest way that we do that is for us to know that they really have heard us, that they really see us, that they understand us. And then we can then have that trust between us that allows us to then elevate and innovate, as Stephen was talking about. And so I think this is the crux of the matter. And if we can get this right, many of us think that we do this well, or we know we have to do it, but we think it's not major, but it really is the crux of what we try to get to and what we really want from our work.
So I'm wondering if other people are feeling challenged. I'm feeling challenged just from the perspective of this is practical. Like in every moment that we can interact with the people that we work with, we have a choice about whether we're going to listen well and care about them first and value them, or whether we're going to talk to get our own point of view heard. So thank you for challenging me, Heather and Stephen, as we go throughout the hour. I'm wondering, Stephen, is there a scenario that you can think of when someone recognized the unsaid in an environment where you worked, responded appropriately, and as a result, you saw greater organizational and team success?
Absolutely. I've got several. Let me just give one example though. And what I love about this idea that Heather highlights is the first step in this cycle of active listening, recognize the unsaid. And my father in his 7 habits would say these words. He would say, listen with the eyes for feeling, which is a way of trying to say, I'm trying to recognize the unsaid. I'm trying to see what else is going on. Let me give you an illustration of this at work. It's a friend of mine, Cheryl Batchelder. She was the CEO of Popeyes. And they'd had 4 CEOs in the prior 7 years before she came in. 3 people turned down the job right in front of her because the system was so broken. Popeyes, the fast food franchise, selling chicken, but it was kind of broken at the time that she came in as the new CEO. And there was not just distrust between the home office and the franchisees, there was outright hostility. And it was really broken. But she came in and she modeled the behavior. She went first. And she said her first step was really to listen. So she went on this listening tour, but she didn't just kind of go through the motions and let people talk. She was listening for the unsaid. She was trying to recognize maybe it was what was not being said, because when there's low trust, people are afraid to tell the truth. And so they might have said something, but left a lot unsaid. She tried to hear the unsaid, to recognize, to see the unsaid, and she saw it. And people felt understood by her because she recognized that the franchisees felt devalued, and they felt like they were just a cog in the wheel, but they weren't valued and they weren't respected. They weren't listened to. They weren't heard. She sensed that from them. The unsaid there was, hey, home office, you need to model the behavior. You need to go first. You need to perform yourself. You keep pointing the finger at us. What about you? And not all of that was said to her, but that was the unsaid. She recognized that. Long story made short is she effectively and maybe unwittingly went through all 5 steps of this cycle of active listening that Heather beautifully outlines, of recognizing the unsaid, seeking to understand, decoding it, acting on it, closing the loop. And she built trust. And they actually went from maybe among the lowest levels of trust to the highest levels of trust in the industry. They measured it at 95% of the trust between the home office and the franchisees, which is an extraordinary achievement. And once they built that trust, it changed everything. And their performance improved dramatically. They became innovative, creative, engaged, inspired. And they went from 14% market share to 27%. And the stock price went from 11 to 79. She unleashed the greatness of the people of the organization by unleashing the greatness of the people. And it started with understanding. And that started by truly not just hearing what people said, but to also, in addition, to recognize the unsaid. And then people really felt heard, valued, and understood. Really a powerful example of this active listening at work and what the impact can do.
I love that example so much, Stephen, because when we think about, people say, well, how do you do that? I mean, a big part of this is awareness. It's kind of social awareness. It's taking the time to pause enough to notice the signs that are happening in the culture as you walk in. I give an example sometimes when I talk, particularly when I'm talking to leaders, and I say, oh, sometimes do you hear people like laughing or chatting in one office and you walk in and everybody just shushes up? Why is that? Why did they stop talking amongst themselves when you enter the room? And the question then is there a lack of trust there? Do they not trust you with what it is they were talking about? And so kind of looking deeper to say, how much are we pausing? How much are we reflecting? How much are we, again, ridding ourselves of all our agendas as we walk in a room or with people one-on-one in a group, whatever that is, irrespective of your title. We're just talking about in the workplace. How much are you going into it just paying attention, not talking, just kind of taking in sincere experience of what's happening around you, because you notice a lot. And I know I can think of myself at times as a leader when I would have a team member who I would notice something was off. Something was off. Now I had the courage to address it, to kind of see how the person was and to go deeper. That's another step in this whole recognizing it, because you can't even go to really listening unless you're recognizing it and you're willing to kind of dive into the conversation, right? But it's that noticing things around you that are happening, because otherwise there's blind spots if you're not doing that. That's what's embedded in recognizing the unsaid. So kudos to the Popeye CEO for doing that.
Yeah.
And what a small world moment. I have had the opportunity to support Cheryl, and I can tell you that she's an amazing listener in day-to-day experience as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just who she is. It's
Mhm.
deep in her being. She tries to
Yes.
understand people.
Yeah, if people need another book to buy in addition to these two, Cheryl's book, Dare to Serve, tells the story of that stock turnaround. It's pretty incredible. So in a moment, we're going to invite all of you to share with us on a really important question that we want to get your feedback on, and we're going to use Menti. So just be ready for that. Heather, I would love to hear you share with us what you think some of the biggest stumbling blocks are to listening well at work.
I think, the biggest thing is we think about, well, with manager titles, often there's just so much in the agenda. There's just so much going on, and they're just running around, their heads chopped off most of the time, and really kind of having a hard time with just tactical stuff all day. So releasing all of that need to get on and be on agenda nonstop is a big part, because we can't actively listen if we're on agenda. And that goes to the mindset, right, that I talked about earlier, that if we enter into our interactions with people and we're seeking to get versus seeking to give, we're seeking to get from them, not to serve them, immediately we're not going to be in the right spot to get what we need in the end anyway. It's just we're never going to reach any kind of goals if we don't go into it with the right mindset. So I'd say the biggest barrier is just having too many things going on. The other thing is kind of what I talked about before and how it ties to Stephen's work, which is a big barrier to listening is when people aren't actually telling us the truth. So it's the listening isn't fruitful if what they're saying to us is in fact the truth. It's part truth. It's they're shading certain parts of their messages because they don't know how we're going to react. But if we've built that trust up with them, again, first part of it is by listening. But there's all these other things that Stephen has in his framework that helps us get there. Then they can tell us the truth. Then our listening is fruitful, and now we can get to the bottom of what they really need from us. So I would say those would be two things: the distractions and really not having the trust there to really get the truth anyway. And here's an example. I remember right after George Floyd, there were a lot of people, clients that come to me, people would come to me and they'd be like, well, we had a roundtable. We did these group sessions and it was like crickets chirping, like no one talked. No one shared with us the things. I'm like, well, did you do the hard work in advance? You don't just have a meeting on your calendar and assume everybody's going to just open up about what they want. You have to do this. You have to do the trust building first. And this is why the work that Steve and I do is so tied together, because you have to have that. And it's so funny because you get the trust by listening, and you listen by getting, both way, that symbiosis that he talked about earlier. So I would say those are the two barriers that I can think of. While there are many more, those are probably the two biggest in my mind.
Well, let's.
Becky just had this comment on that, on the first barrier of the kind of the agenda and the distractiveness. Always remember this, that with people, fast is slow and slow is fast. In other words, if we try to be efficient with people, that's not very effective. Yes, let's be efficient with things. Let's be effective with people. And so by taking that time to listen, to understand, getting off the agenda, getting out of your head and into theirs, trying to understand from their point of view, their frame of reference, it takes just some time and some effort. And someone might say, I don't have time for that. I'm too busy with this agenda. But remember that with people, fast is slow. You try to go through your agenda, it's going to slow down. You're not going to get the commitment and the buy-in and involvement. And slow is fast. You take the time to listen to where people feel heard, valued, and understood. Then suddenly they're committed, they're involved, they're engaged, and then you move fast. And that's the real strength of this. And so you'll better serve your agenda if you seek first to understand.
Thank you, Stephen. So we are going to invite you at this time to use the Menti app, and we have a question that we want to get your feedback on. You're going to see it on my screen as I share, and you will be prompted in Zoom to add your answer to this question. What is your biggest barrier to listening well at work? And we would love to see your feedback. So you should see an invitation through the Zoom, and you should be able to type your responses in. And we look forward to getting your feedback on that question. Impatience, a to-do list, lack of trust. Boy, those are coming in fast now. Time. Do you see how time stands out as a big one? And lots of other answers coming in there. Amazing. I can't even read them. It's so fast.
Yep. And that's exactly what I mean. When we mean agenda, it's just, there's so many tactical things going. There's so many things going on, which is where the time is, or you feel like you can't set aside a time. And here's what I'd say. It's not about quantity. It's about quality. It's about what presence are you giving them? What gift are you giving them of your presence when you have them in front of you for just 5 minutes? That's really the key here. So don't, I've had people say, well, I have 15 direct reports. Like, I can't give everybody. It's not about giving everybody an hour or 30 minutes. It's about saying, when they enter into your sphere, near your circle, how much time and attention are you giving them? Do they feel important in your presence? I think those are the things that I'm talking about. And this is not about a manager title. This is literally just you at work interacting with customers and investors and whoever it is that you're work interacting with. What do they feel when they're in your sphere? Do they feel like you've given them the time, even if it's just 3 to 5 minutes? That's the thing to consider.
Thank you for that. So thank you to all of you who put your thoughts into the Menti, and many of you who are putting your thoughts into the chat. As we come to the end of our prepared conversation, we'd love to wrap up by talking about a time, Stephen, and a time, Heather, where you felt that someone really listened to you and made you feel heard.
Yeah, well, for me, I have numerous examples with my father. He was many things, but among all, he was an extraordinary listener, where I always felt understood as a child, but also as a colleague as we worked together. And so there's numerous examples there. One I'll highlight that is a little different is when I was the CEO of Covey Leadership Center, we had a number of kind of legal disputes that I inherited from a prior time. And I remember going in saying, I'm going to try to understand the other person so that they feel understood as a process of helping to settle these disputes and come up with third alternatives. So I kind of led out with doing that and really focused on trying to understand them. And I felt like I was pretty successful at doing that. And when people felt understood, we could come up with solutions. But I remember one time I kind of led out with this, but the other party came back and reciprocated so beautifully, in kind, and said, well, Stephen, I really want to understand you and your perspective, not just from the company perspective, but from you personally, of how you're feeling on this and this whole thing. And they were so sincere, genuine, reflective, but genuinely demonstrated their desire to understand me, that I truly, at the end of this, and it took several hours, kind of it was like peeling the onion and just getting inside, where at the end, I felt so understood by them, and they felt so understood by me, that together we created a third alternative that neither of us could have imagined. And I believe the gift of the power of that came from the mutual understanding. And it was extraordinary. We created something better, but also how we felt about each other was different in kind than when we went in. And I felt firsthand the power of feeling heard, valued, and understood at work. And it was mutual. They felt it from me and I felt it from them, and it changed everything.
Amazing. Thank you for that story.
These are the story. I'd like to challenge people to thinking about, when we think about listening and the times when we felt heard, and then the times when we felt kind of small and really ignored, and to think about when I'll have people like in an audience, for example, if I'm speaking to them, say, you know, raise your hand if you can remember the time when someone made you feel listened to, and you can remember to this day, like the entire story. And now raise your hand when you can think of the time when you did not feel heard, when someone made you feel this small, inconsequential, irrespective of what your voice and what you're saying. And they both raise their hand, and I say, now, which one would you rather be? Would you rather be the one that someone recalls you as the person who did hear them, who made them feel seen, or the opposite? And I like to say right now is that we all have a choice. We all have a choice on how we make others feel when they are in our presence. We can make them feel heard, valued, and understood, or we can make them feel inconsequential, as if they have no bearing on any of our decision making or anything that's happening inside the workplace. So just know that there is a choice to be had here. So I remember a manager of mine, and I'll never forget him. In my mind, he was the best manager ever. And it was because he recognized the unsaid in ways, like he was an accountant, CPA type. So in a stereotypical way, you wouldn't really see him as someone to be like super emotionally intelligent and like really, he was so good. He had it all, and he could take it in the environment. He would see me and he could sense when I was frustrated. And one such day he did that. And he came down my office, knocked on the outside of the door, and he came to me and he said, Heather, and he kind of smiled, and this real big smile. And at first I'm like, oh boy, like, what did I do wrong now? And he just sat down in a chair and started to just see how he was doing, checked in on me, and then said, listen, I know that the leadership team has been stalling you on a lot of your projects, and we hired you to do all these great things. And I want you to continue to be doing that great work. But keep your chin up. Know that we're working on it. And I want you to keep doing all that, but just give us some patience, but we'll be there. Okay. I just want to make sure you know you're doing great work. And I felt like in that moment, he walked through so many of those things I talk about the cycle, because he recognized the unsaid and just like the ways I was engaging with him, the ways I stopped engaging with him, how I wasn't as meeting any ways I may have responded that weren't to him, but in a group context, and then came to me and that was the compassionate action he displayed, to lean in to find out what was happening with me and to show me that compassion through just leaning in. And he didn't have to do anything else but to do that, and to do it in a spontaneous way. He didn't set an appointment on my calendar. And when he did that, it wrapped up to me the sense of importance that I had in his life. I didn't feel like I was just a cog, somebody just there to get his job done, to do his doing. And so how many times can we do that? I think not even, again, whether we're managing people or not, how many times can we give that sense of importance, impart in people that sense that they have a place at work, and they have a place on our team, or they have a place just in the world, and that we love and value their humanity, their humanness, them just being them. This might sound squishy to people, but I guarantee you this kind of behavior will inspire, as Stephen talks about, will inspire people to greatness, will make them want to go to the nth degree, to the end of the planet for you. Because to this day, I would do anything for that man. Anything for that man, because of how he treated me, and always went out of his way to go deeper and to seek to understand what my particular issues were. So
thank you for that.
That's really beautiful and powerful, Heather. And you can see, this is where Heather's work is so additive and insightful to what's out there of achieving, when someone feels heard, valued, and understood. Look at what it did to Heather. Look what it does to all of us. And so beautiful.
thank you.
Thank you both for sharing those powerful stories. We are going to switch in a moment to taking some attendee questions. But before we do that, I do want to make sure that those of you who are with us today do know how to access Heather's book and to become a part of the exciting launch that's coming. So I'm going to let you know about that quickly, and then we're going to move on to some of the questions that you all have been putting in the chat. So first of all, for those of you who might want to pre-order the book, well, first, we want to invite you to be a part of the VIP book launch team. Heather has put out some amazing perks that you can enjoy if you choose to support her in sharing the message of the book with others. So you can scan this QR code or go to the link that Wendy is putting in the chat today to become a part of the VIP book launch team. Or you can also find out about how to pre-order your copy on Amazon today, or you can pre-order your book in bulk for your team on Porchlight. And Heather, you may have missed this in the chat, but Trent had mentioned that he picked up a 10-pack for his entire team. So for those of you who are here as part of your professional development, maybe you're leading a team, maybe you're part of a team, we encourage you to go ahead and buy the book in bulk for your team today. And the book will be available in later April 28, right? Exactly 1 month from
25th.
today, 25th. Man, sorry about that. Got the dates mixed up in my head, April 25th. So less than a month, you can have the book in your hands and get it into the hands of your team. So thanks to those of you who are saying that you've gone ahead and bought the book. So I've seen a few questions on a theme, and I've seen some other people elevating the questions. This is a hard one, but I know you two are really smart. So we have from Ala, from Gwen, from Shelley, several others who want to know, what do you do when you have a narcissist on your team, someone who's dominating the conversation, not really giving a chance for others to be heard? How can you shift that challenging dynamic?
I'll go first on this, and then Stephen, you can follow up. One thing I would say is it's important for team meetings that we establish ground rules. And so, whether you are the manager, so if you're the manager, obviously it's easier to establish the ground rules. You can always recommend that you establish ground rules if you aren't the manager for how the meeting is going to go and how much time each person gets. That would be kind of one thing. Ground rules are so critical to how do we operate meetings to be efficient so we're not in them for a long time and we get a lot out of them. So that would be key. The other thing I would say is I've had this before where I've been facilitating group meetings and one person wants to dominate the conversation. For some reason, they're not thinking the other people their voices are as valuable as theirs. And so what'll often happen is I'll say to them, "Oh, that's great. That is really good stuff, Jim, for example. I'd love to hear what Sally and Joseph have to say. What do you all have to say?" And then I'll turn kind of in that direction, which is not like my full body turning, but at least my head will turn. And I want to make sure that they know that there's respect given to all the people equally at the table. So that's what I would do. And whether I think you can do this, if you feel like you're courageous, irrespective of your title, I think anybody could kind of take that on. So if you have a coworker who's dominating and you're a coworker, but not a manager, and you're at a table and this is happening, you could do the same thing and be like, "Wow, ooh, that was good. That was a lot to process. I don't know. It'd be cool. Like, what do you think?" You can still say that. You don't have to have a title to do that. So those would be a couple things I would do. Stephen?
That's wonderful. What Heather just said. And then I think I would just add to it. Sometimes knowing the person that might be narcissistic in these ways, sometimes having private one-on-one conversations, either in advance of the meeting or at a break in the meeting and or after the meeting, and in which you acknowledge the person, because they also want to feel heard and understood, but you acknowledge them and say, "You know what, I'm going to make sure you have a chance to get across, but I want to hear from everybody else along the way. I'll come back to you though." And so that you're basically trying to help in this process, just acknowledging who they are and their whole approach. But you can get derailed without that so often, where someone is just dominating it. But I've learned that even showing that understanding to a narcissist, which is very hard. I mean, the true narcissist, it's really hard. But even doing that offline in advance can be really helpful to the process. Heather described things you can do during the midst of it, and maybe in front of it. We could do some things too, anticipating some of this.
That's helpful. So from Keith, how do you operate effectively in a culture in which active listening is not valued?
I love this question. And here's why. I kind of alluded to this earlier, that this active listening thing is about a choice, and that each of us individually in our own chairs and in the circle that we stand in have a choice. And we have to first start with us. We have to first start with, how much are we listening, and listening in the way that I talk about, again, that has an element of action and an element of taking in the sensory experience and an element of leaning in and following up with people to let them know what we're going to do about it. How well are we, in fact, doing that? Because here's the thing, we can't change others. If we can change our own behaviors first, and then others around us might catch on. Potentially, we could do book clubs together where we talk through some of these things. There's ways to influence things around us, but trying to control like how everybody's going to listen is not the right way to do it. It's to say, I'm going to stand in my own shoes and own this listening thing. And when I own it in a way that leads with compassion, that desire to really seek in a fertile way, then we bring people into the circle to want to be more like that. Are we going to change everybody? Absolutely not. If you're in a place that's like full of narcissists and like nobody wants to listen and like everybody's getting a voice in, I would also say start to investigate either other roles or other places where people are more interested in changing and improving. You don't have to stay put. If no one wants to change and you want to, we all have options. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and I agree completely. In fact, this modeling is so critical that we model. Someone needs to go first. Leaders go first. So if we're not seeing understanding, then let's be the model of understanding. Let's show what it could look like and feel like, and let people experience that and feel it from us. Again, leaders go first. So they're the first to model understanding, the first to be empathic, the first to recognize the unsaid. They go first. And that's the whole premise of this trust and inspire, is that, we model, we trust, we inspire. And in the modeling, one of the key things we need to model is empathy to go along with the performance. Those are kind of interesting combinations, empathy and performance. But the key to influence, to our performance, is to first be influenced, to have that empathy, to model. And when you model, then you can become a mentor and help others do the same. So first model, then mentor, and begin to ripple out in doing this. But I find that there's no substitute for modeling. I used to kind of downplay it, thinking, not downplay it, I used to kind of stipulate, kind of saying, well, of course you model. Let's move to these other things like you trust and inspire. But I've come back to saying, you can't just stipulate modeling. It needs to be front and center. This is the heart of leadership, who we are. And to model this understanding, this empathy, and so that people experience it from us, that gives them a vision of what's possible, and they experience the impact of it. It gives them the emotional and the psychological air. And then you can become a mentor to help others do the same.
Very
Amen
powerful.
Again. Amen again. Like I'm right there.
All right. So Stace is really wanting us to ask this question. I'm finally getting to it, Stace. Stace says, Heather, you're a high energy person who's a quick thinker. You're able to remain fully present in person in the moment, or online or in person. Sorry, Stace, I'm stepping all over your comments. So she would like to know, what is your best tip for slowing down and tuning in? She's asking for a friend.
Yes. She's actually amazing at this, by the way. She's a really good listener. Very, very dialed in. I would say, I remove me from the picture. Remove you from the picture. Why does everything have to start and stop with our needs? Why can't we sit down in an interaction or stand face to face with someone and be going at it for their benefit first? So if I'm there with them, they want me in that moment. They need me in that moment. So why can't I give my all to them and focus on their needs in the moment and not be about like, well, what am I going to get out of this? It is so much about mindset that I can't even tell you. If you get your mindset right first before you enter in these interactions, your level of presence will increase. Think about what it is you're giving them. Understanding it is a huge gift. You know, that when you see the statistics on suicides, on mental health issues, a lot of people just don't feel important, like they are inconsequential on this planet. They don't feel heard. They aren't seen. So what gift do you give them in that moment? So when I know the importance there, when I understand the value, it's worth my time to be present for them. Even though I can be a quick thinker too, right? We can be all those things, but it first needs to start with solving for the person in front of us.
Yeah, I agree. I think it does start with the mindset. And so I always try to come back to my mantra, be efficient with things and effective with people. Because the moment I try to be efficient with people, I lose effectiveness. And I kind of come back to that saying, pay the price. It's worth it. Get into their world, as Heather is saying. try to understand from their frame of reference, not from my own. And the tendency is to always start with your own because we're coming at it ourselves. But I recognize if I stay there, I might be efficient, but I'm not going to be very effective. And so I come back, efficient with things, effective with people, manage things, lead people, diagnose things, understand people. It's a mindset. It's an attitude. You know, my father in 7 Habits would talk about this empathy and the power of it, that the greater mass is like an iceberg, and the greater mass of the iceberg is underneath the surface. That's the attitude. That's the heart. That's the desire to connect with a human. And then the tip of the iceberg is more the skill and getting better at it. That matters too. But what matters the most is that fundamental mindset and paradigm and desire coming in to understand another person because they're human. And understanding does not necessarily mean agreement. I might completely disagree. I'm just trying to seek to understand, and so that we can have mutual understanding, and then we can come up with maybe new possibilities, new approaches, new alternatives.
We've got a question here, Stephen. People are trying to remember the 3 things you said: diagnose things, understand people, manage things, lead people, be efficient with tasks, be effective with people. Is that all 3?
Yeah, efficient with things, effective with people. It's just,
all right.
It's a mindset, because it's not either or. We often, management, leadership, they're both important. You manage things, you lead people. The moment we start to manage people like things, we're going to end up with no people and a lot of things because they're going to leave and go elsewhere. They have choices and options. And so it's not either or, it's and, but the context matters. And with people, see, that's where we move into understanding and into leadership, into effectiveness, not into diagnosing and into just management of them. No one wants to be managed. People want to be led, and into efficiency. Trying to be efficient with people is the height of ineffectiveness.
Thank you for repeating those for us. As we come to the end of the hour, we want to make sure that you have the chance once again to scan this QR code to join the VIP book launch team with Heather Younger for The Art of Active Listening, which is coming on April 25th. And you can enjoy those exclusive perks. You also can scan one of these 2 QR codes to pre-order an individual copy of the book on Amazon. It will be available in Kindle, paperback, and audiobook, and narrated by the author. Yes,
absolutely.
Narrated by Heather herself. So if you want to hear more of that inspiration in your ears, then the audiobook will be coming soon. And then also we encourage you to bulk pre-order the book for your team on Porchlight Books, where you will get the best discounts for those bulk purchases. I'm not sure, Wendy, if we have the link for Stephen M. R. Covey's latest book, Trust and Inspire, that we can also put in the chat if you'd like to pick up a copy of that today. This is a free webinar, also the most expensive webinar you'll attend all week because of all the book recommendations, but well worth the investment. As you can see, I do have both of these books with myself today. So as we wrap up, we want to kick it back to you, Stephen, and to you, Heather, to send us out with some inspiration today.
Okay, well, I'll go first so Heather can close out, because we're focusing on her magnificent work coming out this next month, The Art of Active Listening. Let me say this, that Heather's book, as I said at the start, it's insightful and additive to what we've been focused on for years, but still struggle at. And I think that these additions will make it more actionable and practical. And that's the second thing. It is practical, tangible, actionable. You can read this and feel like, I can immediately begin to do some things. Yes, the bigger thing is the mindset coming in, and that's causes us to work on ourselves, but just understanding, to recognize the unsaid, and then to make sure that we decode, make sure that we act, we close the loop, that those things are important too. So this is very practical. But the final thing I'll really say is we're going to get this from someone who models this in Heather. And I find there's greater power in a work when it's coming from someone who deeply not only believes this, but lives it. And Heather she is a model of what she has written about. She lives it. It's in her. It's who she is. And when you are with Heather, each of us, and especially me, you feel heard, you feel valued, you feel understood, because that's who she is.
Thank you, Stephen. I just want to say that listening, active listening is a choice. We all have it. If we want to leave a legacy on this planet, the people to remember us as the ones who made them feel understood, made them feel important, then it's worth it for us to get this active listening thing right once and for all. So I'm excited for you to join on this journey. Hopefully you join the active listening movement through the launch team. Order your copy of the book and kind of follow along and use the practical guide that I've given you inside this book to help you really help people at work finally feel valued and understood despite your title. So welcome.